Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to Taylor-Made Cards for You. Well, today I'm here to share with you my latest kit called Transcontinetal Railroad. And this is a really fun kit. And if you like vintage grunge, you're going to love this kit. The project that I'm going to make today is using a couple of the new dies from the Sussex Tim Holtz collection. And the main die that I'm going to be using is the die set called Postal. The Postal die set has this mini envelope that I'm showing you here that creates a cute little folio. And when I say cute little folio, I mean little. These are miniature envelopes and they turn out so cute to use for many of your projects. Now when I cut this die out, of course I cut it out using my new kit called Transcontinental Railroad. So the paper is already some vintage goodness. It's got some nice vintage colors. It's got some rust as well. And when I cut it out, I also cut out the little piece that is meant as an insert, and I'm using it to actually cover the inside of the envelope so the white doesn't show. Now this is perfect if you're not going to add any pages. You can go ahead and add the insert first like I'm doing here, but I found that it probably wasn't a great idea to add the insert before I added the pages, and you're going to see why in just a minute. So what I would recommend, if you do want to make this little folio, don't add this insert here until the very end. Now this little folio is going to have 3 pages, and the Transcontinental Railroad Kit has some wonderful ephemera to decorate your envelopes up and your pages up perfectly. So once I had the 2 envelopes put together, as you can see here, I realized that I probably shouldn't have glued down that insert because I have to add the envelope underneath that insert. So what I would recommend again is don't glue down that insert until the very end. So that way you'll have your envelopes ready to be glued together. I was able to lift up that page a little bit so I can get the flap of the envelope underneath, and then I went ahead and I proceeded with gluing the 2 envelopes together. Now once the 2 envelopes are glued together, you can see it folds perfectly in the middle to make a little miniature book. And I went ahead and I grabbed some of my walnut stain to just add up a little bit more grunge. Now like I said, this paper has some wonderful grunge already, but if you want to distress it a little bit more, you can use any of your distress inks. I love using walnut stain, but vintage photo would look great as well. Alright, so after I've added my ink, I'm just kind of testing my pockets to make sure everything is good, making sure I didn't glue my pocket shut, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue the flap over to complete the little pocketbook. Alright, so let's go ahead and start working on the pages. Like I said, I'm going to make 3 pages for this little book folio. And you're going to need 6 pages cut out because you're going to glue them together so you don't have any white showing. So as you can see here, this is an example of the pages inserted in one of my little books. Now the way that you're going to make these pages is you're going to use the little tabs from the Sussex die set called Specimen. And this is the second Tim Holtz die set that I used to create this little book. So I went ahead and I cut out several of these little flaps because not only are you going to use them for the pages, but you're going to use them on top of your pages as well. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. All right, so I glued the flap towards the middle of the page, and then I took my second piece and I glued that page on the other side to cover the white. So now I have 2 pages with some wonderful images on front and back. And then I'm going to go ahead and proceed on to the second page. Now you're going to want to use your first page as a guide because ideally you'd like to have your flaps lined up exactly the same way because we're going to be gluing these together. So just use your first page as a guide to get your little tab positioned close to or exactly to the first position of the page. And you're going to do this 3 times because ultimately we want to end up with 3 pages. So as you can see, I'm just folding my flap, adding my glue, and then again, just kind of using my first page as a guide to try to get that tab in exactly the same position. And once you're done gluing your pages together, you're going to have 3 pages that we're going to add to our little book folio. All right, so now that we have our 3 pages together, we're going to go ahead and just kind of line them up. And as you can see, I did a pretty good job of lining up those tabs in the same position. Because what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and glue them together, and then we're going to put those glue pages, the tab, right underneath your paper. So this again is another example of why you don't want to glue your inserts down before you add your pages. I was fortunate enough that my glue was still kind of tacky, that I was able to lift up the page in order to get the tab underneath the insert. But you may not be as fortunate, so I would just recommend not putting in those inserts until after you've added your pages. But as you can see, I was able to glue my pages together, the tabs, and then get it right underneath that little flap. And now I have 3 pages attached inside of my little booklet. And now it's ready to decorate. So once again, I grabbed my dauber and I added my Distress Walnut Stain ink. And I'm just adding some ink inside the middle of the pages and just around it to add a little bit more vintage grunge. Now the paper that I used on this little folio was a little bit more decorative than the first one. On my first book, which you see on the right side of the screen, the pages were a little bit more plain, so I used some of my ephemera from the Transcontinetal Kit to decorate the pages. I also used some of the miniature paper dolls from Tim Holtz, which worked perfectly. But for this particular one, I did want to make it a little bit different, so I cut out some of the pages to just have a little bit more interest. And then for the front of this book, I'm going to go ahead and use one of those little pages that I cut out, and I'm just going to add it right to the front of the book. Now there's a few things that you can do here. On my first book, I did sew around the edges just to give it a little bit more interest, but I didn't necessarily want to stop the camera and sew this folio together. So that's why this one doesn't have any sewing around the edges. But if you want to reinforce your book or just again add a little bit more interest, you can certainly sew around the edges of the book. Another thing that I did is I took my corner rounder and I rounded the pages of the pages in the book, and I did it for both of the little books here. Again, it just gives it a little bit more interest and it makes them look like true pages. So after I added the corner rounders to the pages, I'm going to go ahead and add the tabs to the pages. And again, these are the same tabs that we used to adhere the pages to the book. But you can also use them as tabs on your pages to add little sentiments, little numbers, just anything you want to add to decorate up your tabs and your book. And I added 3 tabs, 1 tab on each page. And the way that I did this is I added the first tab on the first page on the top, and then I added the 3rd tab on the 3rd page at the bottom. And once I had those 2 tabs in place, then it was easy for me to figure out exactly where the middle tab should go on the middle page. I didn't necessarily want to add the 2nd tab before getting my 3rd tab in place because I wanted to make sure that they were aligned perfectly inside of my closed book. And then once again, I'm getting out my vintage walnut stain ink and I'm adding a little bit more distress around the edges. Now, putting these books together is just the mechanics. While it's something that you need to do, obviously, to get your little book together, my favorite part is the actual decorating of the books. I think it's so fun to find little bits and bobs, pieces of ephemera, paper dolls to add to our little books. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm using one of the dies from the Postal Sussex die set to add a little bit of interest to the front of my little folio. And this is the registered label. I went ahead and I cut it out on some black cardstock, and then I poked out the registered letters so that way you can see that through on the front of the page. Now these little pieces here, what I'm doing essentially is I'm taking out the middle inserts of some of the letters. As you're going to see here, the D has a little insert and the R has a little insert because you want to be able to see the letters a little bit easier. And these are small pieces. So if you just can't get some of these little pieces off of your letters, you can easily use a black marker or a black pencil to mark your letters just to make them look a little bit more realistic. I was able to punch out the insert for the letter D, but I had a hard time getting those little dots for the R letters. So I went ahead and used my black Copic marker to add the little dot in the top part of the R, just to make the letter look a little bit more realistic. All right, so now I'm working on the tabs, and as you saw earlier, I did add the 3 tabs to the 3 pages, but now I want to add an additional tab to the actual tab, so that way I can add some numbers. My tabs that I punched out with my dies had a lot of letters and it was a little bit more decorative, so I wanted to have a more plain piece of paper so I can add some letters and some numbers to the tabs just to make them look a little bit more decorative. And once I added those pieces to the tabs, then I pulled out some of my remnant rubs, and this is the specimen. I believe it's called specimen field notes type of remnant rubs, and these work perfectly for this little folio. It has lots of letters and numbers and little sentiments as well that you can use to add to your little book. So as I finish decorating up my little book, I want to go ahead and tell you about the hop we have going on. So the design team is using my kit, Transcontinetal Railroad, and we're all making projects using this fun kit. The kit has some beautiful journal pages, it has some wonderful ephemera pieces, and of course it has some 8.5 by 11 pages as well. So not only can you make little folios, but you can make cards, you can make journals. There's so much that you can make using this kit. And if you are a vintage lover, you're going to love all of the distress pages on this kit. You've got rust, it looks old, it looks aged. So while you can add some of your distress inks to make the pages look a little bit older, on their own, they're perfect as they are. So I'm going to have links to all of the design team videos in my description box below. So be sure to check out the links and hop along so you can check out all of the projects using my Transcontinental Railroad Kit. Also, don't forget to leave me a comment in my comment box below, because I am going to be choosing a random commenter to win this kit. And I'll draw for the winner in a couple of weeks. So go ahead and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about this kit, because I would love to get your feedback. So if you've enjoyed my video, I would sure appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that way you are notified when I do add more videos. So here's an example of 2 little folios that I created. As you can see, the one I'm showing you here has lots of fun little ephemera pieces, paper dolls, and then the other one is just a little bit more eclectic with the pages. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I hope to see you again next time.